In the previous video, we talked about 3 of the main KeyCite symbols you might find in front of a case name and what they mean in terms of whether that case is valid for a particular point of law. In this video, we'll discuss the Overruling Risk Warning KeyCite icon. The Overruling Risk Warning indicates that a document may no longer be good for at least one point of law based on its reliance on an overruled or otherwise invalid prior decision. Let's take the 1996 Malesi case, for example. We notice the overruling risk symbol, which indicates that this case may be implicitly overruled based on its reliance on an overruled or otherwise invalid prior decision. To better identify that point, let's select the right arrow on the overruling risk navigation. Now we've jumped to the point of the opinion where Malesi cites to Aylward, a 1992 case which appears to now be expressly overruled for at least one point of law, hence the red flag. We notice that the court in Malesi applied the natural accumulation rule in determining whether or not the defendant property owner was liable to plaintiff for injuries he sustained after a snow and ice slip and fall accident on the defendant's property. Just for some background, the natural accumulation rule standard places liability on a property owner when the accumulation of snow or ice that plaintiff slipped on was caused by an act of the property owner, such as the owner used an ice scraper to chip off ice from their car window and onto the ground. Later that day, a visitor of the property steps on the loose pile of ice and falls. That's an example of unnatural accumulation wherein the property owner would be found liable. An example of natural accumulation would be if the plaintiff slipped on ice on the defendant's property during the middle of a winter storm because, well, ice is slippery. Under the accumulation rule, the property owner is not liable for the plaintiff's injuries. In applying the rule, the court in Malesi relies on and cites to the Aylward case, a case that identifies the accumulation rule as the standard governing slip and fall liability in snow and ice related accidents. However, if we click on our negative treatment, we notice that 14 years after Malesi was decided, the Papadopoulos case held that courts would no longer apply the accumulation standard to slip and fall cases, and the correct standard is the reasonable care standard, thus overruling Aylward. Because Malesi relies on Aylward in support of the application of the accumulation rule, it is now implicitly overruled for that point of law, and that's why you'll find the orange overruling risk icon in front of the case name. Now that was a lot to digest. Let's break this into a graphic. Most recently, in 2010, Papadopoulos was decided. Papadopoulos expressly overruled Aylward for the point of law that the accumulation rule is the standard for deciding property owner liability. Aylward is no longer valid for the point of law, and thus we note the red KeyCite flag in front of Aylward. However, nearly 18 years of case law was decided between the time Aylward was decided and Papadopoulos was decided, meaning there are potentially hundreds, maybe more, cases that rely on Aylward in applying the now overruled accumulation standard, including cases like Malesi and Pruner. Papadopoulos does not expressly overrule Malesi and Pruner, but that doesn't mean that those cases are completely valid. In fact, because of the overruling risk warning, we now know that Malesi and Pruner are not valid for the point of law, setting forth the accumulation rule as the standard for deciding property owner liability. Without the overruling risk warning, it would be very difficult and time-consuming to identify whether or not a point of law in a case you're citing to has been implicitly overruled. Looking for additional training opportunities? Sign into your Westlaw account on lawschool.tr.com and learn about upcoming events and webinars. Complete interactive learning modules on Westlaw's Knowledge Center, or reach out to your account manager under the Contact Us tab for help.